Welcome everyone to the April 27th, 2023 Helm developer call. I'll go ahead and drop the meeting minutes into chat here. All right. There's one announcement that I've got for this meeting, and that is that Helm 3.12 is scheduled for May 10th, and we do the release candidate the week before, the Monday of the week before. So May 1st is the current day slated for the release candidate, which happens to be Monday. So if you've got any last minute changes or things you want to get into Helm 3.12, please feel free to bug me. I'm going to make myself available for at least the rest of today and tomorrow and probably Monday morning to go just poke at things and see what else we need to get in. But I know there are a number of things, so there will be a little bit of scrambling over the next couple of days. Does anybody have any other announcements? Okay, his acceptance. With that, we'll move on to the discussions, and I see somebody's got the first one for shout outs. Marion's. There's somebody on the call here. No, maybe it's just a misfiguring of things in the form. All right, then I guess if we have no one for that, then Ian, you've got one on the output of failed jobs.
Yeah. So I've been, I think I discussed, I had this idea a little bit ago, and I was working on a HIP for it, and actually I submitted it, and then I moved it back to draft because one of my colleagues was like, "Hey, Ian, I think there's some it can already do some of these things that you're wanting it to do." This HIP had, so I'm like, "That's great." First, and then he's like, "And actually, for the second half, there's already a PR that looks like it kind of does what you want." And I looked at it and I'm like, "Yep, that does do what I want." And so I kind of wanted to just check on this call and see, that there's this pull request out here for failed jobs. Looks like it's been around for a really long time. I'm thinking I could still submit like a HIP for that PR. That's like my take on why it's important and why we need it, if that would help things. I don't know if that, I could reach out to that contributor and ask if they'd still be interested in like rebasing it. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of see.
Yeah, and somebody else could even take those commits, pull them into that branch, update it as long as they kept the original attribution and update it. But we'd have to see whether this is something we're interested in, and that's a darn good question. I'd have to go look at this. This is one I am not at all familiar with, so I can't speak to. I honestly, but I'll leave it open. I am sure it's not going to make it into 3.12. But I'll leave it open and see about getting it into one after 3.12. I say that because it's a large one, which is a fair amount. And if 3.12 release candidate gets cut on Monday, there's no way I'm going to have the time to fully read this and understand it and respond to it with the other things that need to happen between now and then for this. I just know that I personally don't. Somebody else may come along and have the time for it. But I don't have the time as a maintainer to give this the good review it needs.
Oh no, yeah, I totally understand. It looks like at one point Bacon Gobbler had reviewed it, and then I think he kind of fell off into doing some other things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm happy to reach out to the original creator and see if he's interested in rebasing, and and I'm happy on writing a HIP for it too, if that seems like it would be useful. I don't really know if when things are in this phase, if they really need a HIP, or if it's like this is already kind of far along and don't bother with that.
I'm not sure. I'll have to read it and take a look at it. I'll add it to my to-do list to circle back to.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, just let me know. And I'm happy to help definitely with this one, because I care about this one particularly. So
okay. I understand. All right. Then I guess the next one, Michael, you've got PR 9426.
Yeah, so I guess this is one that we discussed a couple of weeks ago as well. It's just that dry run can do the lookup functions. Matt, I think you looked at it yourself there, and the author was to rebase it, which he has done.
Yes.
So it would be, I would really, really, really like to get this into 3.12 if it's any way
Okay.
possible.
I've got the tab open. The rebasing was the big thing for me. So let me go see whether this is one of the ones I want to get on the short list to review here. So I
Okay.
will do that later today.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Then there is this other one, 11.479.
Yeah, so this relates to just supporting foreground cascade deletion. So Andrew Block reviewed this last week and approved it, but I guess as its size large, then it needs another maintainer to have a look at it as well. So it would be great if somebody could do that. I would say the previous one, I'd be far more interested in getting in if it was a choice between the two of them, but it would be good if we get this as well if someone has time.
Yeah. Okay. I will. Yeah, I will look. The 9426 needs 2 maintainers approval, so I will chase down that one. But I'll try and work on both of these. So
that's great. Thanks a million.
So let me ask this: there's no other items here. Does anybody have anything else they want to discuss?
Hey everyone, I'm Ishan. I'm new here.
Welcome.
So actually, I was just started exploring Helm, and like I was using it for a project that I'm developing, and like I was facing a slight problem. So what my current directory structure is like, I have multiple microservices and I have charts for each of them, and I have a chart for similarly a MongoDB deployment. Now the thing is that the service name of my MongoDB is the default service name that is defined in _helpers.tpl. But I want to reference that service name as a DNS proxy, so that I want to pass that reference name as an environment variable to my microservices, so that they can internally use that IP to access MongoDB. So I was just wondering how I can do that in Helm chart, because MongoDB would be common to all my microservices, so I cannot just put it as a dependency chart in all of them.
Yeah, for this kind of architecture, what was traditionally done is you install each one of those things separate. And then the name would be something you could pass into all of the charts, for example. There's different ways of doing it, depending on how you want to use configuration management. If you're using something like Helm file or Flux, that's going to be a little bit different. Or if you're just doing it manual, and then you can pass it into configuration, the name into each chart, or you can, just do things the way you would do it in Kubernetes if there was another service and you're doing, DNS references. But that's really the way it was traditionally done here, is don't use it as a specific dependency that is a chart dependency, but pass in configuration that knows how to speak to it and do it the way that is appropriate for whatever resources you're using. Not knowing how you're setting up your microservices and what resources you're using and what version of Kubernetes, that's a little bit difficult. Somebody else here may have some other ideas, but that's traditional. Install each one as its own thing, and then take that reference and pass it in, for Mongo, install that one first, and then pass its information you need, configuration, credentials, all of that stuff into the other ones. And anything that's a credential, use as a secret.
But like the problem I was facing here is, since the default service name, that is the MongoDB.full name, is comprised of the release name hyphen chart name. So that would be kind of defined at runtime for me, depending on what release name I'm providing to the MongoDB.
I see. And are you grabbing an off-the-shelf chart somewhere, or is this a chart you've created?
It is a chart that I have created. It doesn't contain much actually. It's just I'm using the Mongo 4.4 image and adding some diagrams.
And so for the service, you should be able to update the chart to customize the name however you would like to be able to do it.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Can you repeat?
Yeah, in the chart, when you're setting up the service, you may have set it up so that way it puts the release name in it. but you can change that in the chart
Yeah.
and in the service definition to be some other name. So it could be, say, the release name or something you pass as in configuration. You've got options there to change it. So it doesn't have to reflect the release name. It could reflect something else you choose.
Yeah, you're talking about the full name override, I guess.
Yeah, and since it's a chart you are authoring and control, you know, Helm is a package manager, so you can make that package and those services do whatever's appropriate for you.
Like I originally had this doubt because when I saw that you are using release name hyphen chart name to construct a default full name for that, and like when I use Helm create a chart
Yeah.
for me, it by default uses the full name as a service name. So
Yeah,
I thought
you can
like
break away from that. Yeah, you don't need to. Using that pattern isn't a must. Helm create is more to help somebody who's just getting started. You can deviate from any of the conventions there as much as you need to.
okay, like actually my thought process here was, but I thought that since it is a default name, so I thought there might be some way that I can use the same name, or like while passing the context, maybe I can refer dot MongoDB, include MongoDB dot full name, and instead of passing the context as dot, might be that I could have included the context for MongoDB. But yeah, I get that. So basically, the best possible solution for him, for me here, would be to define a custom full name override. Yeah.
Yeah, just override the name. Use a variable to set that, and then pass that same thing into your other charts, so everything knows where to communicate. And then you can change that name when you set up development or QA type environments by passing in different names.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, is there anything else?
I did kind of wonder,
Yeah.
what do we want to do? And you know, maybe there is something already happening here, but what about like the future kind of looking direction of Helm? You know, when I look at like some of these pull requests out here, and I think about like really big kind of picture, like what's the future of Helm and what aligns and what doesn't. I think it's been a while since there's been like a Helm sit down, right, where everyone's kind of gotten together in a room and been like, this is what we want to do, and this is kind of the future. Should there be something like that? Is there something like that already that I don't know about?
There is not something like that. What I think is probably happening is some of the maintainers who become inactive are going to become formally inactive. We're going to have some more, you know, newer maintainers, some fresh blood get involved, and then we will sit down and have that conversation. And we're going through some of that process now. I've had a few maintainers who say they're ready to go emeritus. And so that pull request will be going up here maybe later today, because they've already all confirmed through email they're ready to go emeritus. And then they haven't been voting on new maintainers and things like that. So we'll start to see some fresh blood come in, and then we'll start to be able to have some of those conversations.
Sounds great. Maybe KubeCon in Chicago.
Maybe that would be nice. I know I'm planning on being there, so it would be nice to have some of those conversations there.
Yeah, that would be. So maybe we should try to plan something. That would be a good time.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else? All right.
Do you need any eyes on any PRs that I can assist with? I'm not a maintainer, obviously, but I can still trust the comments.
I
Or any
am
assistance
not
or anything else?
entirely sure on that. I have to go through the 3.12 listed backlog, which is far bigger than what's going to go in it, and start to take a look at what's going on there, which is what I was planning on doing with my afternoon today.
Okay, we'll reach out if you need any assistance.
I will do. Thank you for offering. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
As far as we have the few things here: moderator nodes, issue triage, PR review. I'll say for next week, I'm happy to take on moderator. I should be here next week. Does anybody up for taking notes or issue triage or any of that?
I can do triage again.
Okay, thank you.
Already shown how bad I am at doing notes today, but I'm better at issuing. We'll be working on those again.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else? Then I'll give you all some time back. Thank you. I guess I should ask then. Was there anybody at KubeCon EU who's here? Was there anything
was.
Helm related or anything you all noted you wanted to share or anything? I was not there. So, and no is an acceptable answer.
So I was on the booth for a little while over
Mhm.
at KubeCon EU, the Helm booth. And I guess the biggest thing I noticed was a lot of people having dependency issues with Helm. Like, how do I model my dependencies? That was like the biggest, I think out of like the 5 people that came up, there was like 4 of them that's what they were struggling with is like
Okay.
ordering dependencies and like ending up in like sub dependent Helm chart hell, like where they've gone like 5 levels deep or something like that, and they're like, I like this doesn't work, but like I have to have this ordering and like a lot of
Yeah.
stuff like that. That's was my biggest note, that mental note of like, oh, this is a big problem people are experiencing.
You're absolutely right. And there's a whole bunch of. Go ahead, Joe.
I was saying, I tell my team no. If they want to order something, if they're trying to like, well, we need to have this happen before this happens. I'm like, no. Find a way to handle it within the container.
Yeah, and what I'll say, there's a lot of history around it. So Kubernetes, in theory, all of your stuff should reconcile. So you could just throw everything at it at once, and then in theory, things should slowly reconcile over time to come online, and you should not need ordering. There are some situations, the reality of which, where people have not been able to make that work or have just thrown it off. And for that, I think years ago, when OpenStack folks were running OpenStack in Kubernetes and using Helm to deploy, and they needed specific ordering of services coming up before other things. And they actually created a tool called Armada that used Helm to do that. And it was kind of like a Helm file or similar. And you could do that ordering. But it was all that kind of stuff outside of Helm in your configuration management, right? So if Helm's like a package manager, like an apt or a yum or something like that, then your configuration manager can handle that kind of ordering, and Helm isn't the place to do that. So people who needed that did it over there, is how they approached it. But in theory, you shouldn't need it. In practice, some people have found they do it.
Yeah, and I think part of that is not necessarily even like the startup order of things, but like they need output from the previous chart. Like they're running getting a database or whatever, whatever these things are, like they need to like stagger the output from one to the next thing.
Yeah. And so you're right, your database is going to have credentials. Then how do you pass the credentials into the next chart? Again, that a lot of that ends up becoming a configuration management problem. And how do you do it? Like, are you using a SaaS for it? And then how do you get the SaaS's credentials into a secret that you pass into the chart? But there probably isn't enough documentation on good practices and explanations for it. And I think that's probably ultimately why people have a lot of questions. And I know I've got a lot in my head. If I sat down to do it, say, okay, this is how I'm going to approach it, and here's the problems. But I bet you there's like nothing written on it, and that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
I've had similar patterns that I've had to do both with Helm and with Terraform. You have the same kind of thing with Terraform workspaces and modules a lot of the time. And the general pattern I've fallen into is pre-generate as many names and resources as you can, and then pass them into things. When there are things that you can't pre-generate, you just have to read something that was dynamically generated by like a SaaS product. Hopefully there's an API that you can put in a data source of some kind and say, read this after this is done. And then for the rest, you just have to hack it up as best you can.
Yeah. I mean, I've had my own kind of coping strategies for this too, right? Which is like, I try to always avoid dependent Helm charts whenever I possibly can. And so I might have like a pipeline that, stores things, picks it up and moves it along, that kind of thing. But I can also understand where people want to just use, like, they want to have Helm do that, right? Like they're an independent software vendor, or they're shipping things to customers, and like they want that Helm install experience to just kind of do it and not have another third-party tool involved.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's
it's a
complicated in how
big,
you do it.
yeah,
And let me say, this is not a new problem. When I used to chair SIG apps over in Kubernetes, we discussed a number of different ways to do this, right? Everything from, you have an init container, right? And then the init container goes off and does something, maybe gets the information and then creates a secret that the rest of it can use. And then you've got a known shared secret name across it, right? Like, they've come up with strategies like this on what's the right way to do it. And so I think some of it is debatable and some of it is more documentation needed, and because there's some really neat ideas out there and how this should be done, and they're not written down anywhere for people to pick up.
I'll say the other thing that I noticed too was, I guess a lot of times when I think of Helm, I think of people distributing software outside of their companies.
Yeah.
Most of the people I was talking with were shipping it inside of their own companies as well. Not, there were some people shipping it out, but I don't know, it's probably half and half that were shipping it in versus out. I thought that was just an interesting observation, and not what I would have necessarily expected. So
No, good. Thank you. Did anybody have anything else? Well, if there is nothing else, then I will see you all next week, same time. Have a wonderful week. See you all online.